Chapter 12. Paper Boat. Z89 stared when her reflected self touched the glass from the other side of the door. The cold, hard barrier was the only thing between them. "I am Z89, she whispered. "How did you get here?" She found she could just about make out what the other girl was saying. She seemed to be saying her name was Erin and that she was her sister. "Well, of course she is," thought Z89. "I knew that straight away, as soon as I saw her in the restaurant, when I was with those two nice people with the sad eyes." Erin was speaking again. "I've come to find you and get you out of here, if I can." Z89 smiled at this, but with no real conviction. She knew there was no escape. "It's not safe here. You are in danger. They must not find you here." The other girl held up a tiny paper boat. "I want to help you sail away from here." Erin made the boat look as if it was bobbing up and down on the sea. Z89 laughed, something she very rarely did, and Erin joined in. There was a bond between them, and Z89 knew instinctively it could never be broken now they had found each other. Z89 suddenly bent over and coughed, her body aching from the punishment she endured the day before. Her skin was slowly beginning to heal after an orderly had checked on her, applying ointment to her burns. Painkillers were handed over too, which she quickly swallowed. She was given fresh clothes and a breakfast of weak tea and dry toast. "What does Z89 mean?" Erin was asking through the glass. "Z for Zephyr. That's the name given to this place. The 8 and 9 are the time of my birth. I was born 9 minutes past 8. I'm in the March contingent, Marcon. There are 10 of us." Erin giggled. "That means I'm older than you. I was born at 4 minutes past 8, so you're my little sister." "That's nice," replied Z89. They were both silent for a moment, gazing at each other. Z89 was surprised to see that Erin was bald too. "Your hair! What happened?" Erin stripped off the cap and black hair tumbled out. Z89 grinned. "Oh my goodness, you have beautiful hair." Erin thought back to what Edward told her. It was true. Your hair was part of you, part of your identity. Suddenly, Erin looked serious. "How can I get you out of here, Miranda?" Z89 looked confused. "Who is this Miranda you keep talking about?" "That's your real name, the name given to you by our mum and dad." "I don't have parents. None of us do in here," Z89 said sadly. "You've met them in the hotel where you saw me." Erin knew she'd been right in coming to find her twin. This wasn't a good place. "Those nice people are my parents." "Really? I hope I see them again soon." All of a sudden, Z89 saw her sister's face stiffen and her grey eyes glared back at her through the glass. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything," she uttered, worried that she had offended Erin. Erin suddenly whipped round and was pulled away. "Erin!" she shouted in terror. "Erin!" Another face appeared in her window. It was one of the orderlies. He looked menacingly at her and then disappeared. Z89 sank down against the door, her face in her hands. She could hear Erin's screams as she was dragged away. Butterfly. Erin woke to the gentle sound of birdsong. She curled up, enjoying the warmth and comfort of her bed. Tucking the duvet around her body, she was as snug as a bug in a rug, as her mum would say. "Mum will be calling me for school soon," she thought. Closing her eyes, Erin dozed again, but was aware of the sunlight pouring in now, breaking through the fragile skin of her eyelids. She finally gave up the battle and sat up, rubbing her sleep-filled eyes. She gaped at what she saw when her vision was clear. A bed had been moved. Where was her desk? There was a bookcase full of books and objects, a sofa with an array of colourful cushions, a kitchen area with a kettle and fridge. This wasn't her room. "Where am I?" Erin said out loud. She struggled out of bed, discovering she was wearing pyjamas, and padded around the carpeted room, searching for clues. There were no windows or doors. The room was a box. Ceiling lights glowed like daylight, and a dawn chorus of birds came again from somewhere. The kettle suddenly clicked and steam billowed. Erin jumped at the tiny sound. Music crept into the room through a small speaker. Classical, thought Erin to herself. Toast popped out of a toaster. This is so weird, Erin exclaimed. What is this place? Why am I here? Her stomach rumbled in reply. She was starving. Food first, and then work out how to get out of this strange room. After making coffee and buttering the toast, Erin settled on the sofa, trying to organise her thoughts. Her head throbbed. A dull ache was pressing around it, like a hard band being tightened. Putting her hand on her forehead, something sticky to the touch caused her to sit up. Looking down, smears of blood were etched on her fingers. Instantly, nausea began to invade her body, and she stood looking around for somewhere to be sick. Panic crawled over her skin, her breathing quickened, crushing heat made her break out in a sweat. Erin searched frantically for a door, and just when she thought this is it, a hidden door slid open and revealed a small shower room. Erin ran and knelt at the toilet bowl, just in time. Afterwards, she lay her head on the cold seat and found herself falling through the air. The room was spinning, but she managed to stand and almost fell into the shower. Turning on the hot jets of water, Erin quickly undressed and then relaxed, the scalding water bringing her back to life again. Later, after dressing in the white underwear, shirt, leggings and shoes she'd found in the shower room, Erin returned to the main room. She tried again to think about what had happened and sank down on a chair near the bookcase. A tiny paper boat sat on one of the shelves, and she gasped. She remembered Miranda. Scooping it up, Erin held it on the palm of her hand, and the memories came flooding back. The coffin, finding Miranda in the cell, being discovered. She fought hard against her captors, kicking and punching, using all her karate skills, desperate to escape. Erin finally managed to break free, and she ran swiftly down a corridor, shouting and screaming for help. The orderly barked instructions into a walkie-talkie before giving chase. Rounding a corner, she found two burly men dressed in brown standing, waiting for her. There was no escape. The petite girl was lifted easily by one of the men, but she kicked his shins and dug her elbows hard into his pasty-looking face. He dropped her sharply on the concrete floor, while the second man crouched, holding her down, his oily black hair falling across his face. Snapping and snarling like a rabid dog, his spittle dripped into her eyes, yet Erin's fighting spirit did not diminish. She squirmed and bit and punched, only to find herself weakening. They were too strong for her. A sharp pain in her left arm forced her to look down to see a needle being plunged into her skin. Now, as Erin sat nursing a fresh cup of coffee, she found the images in her head became more fragmented. Visions of another room, waking to find her head and arms clamped to a metal trolley, being wheeled into a noisy machine that turned around her body, and that was it. She couldn't remember anything else until waking up in this room. Erin's eyes roamed around her surroundings. The comfort here was in stark contrast to Miranda's cell. A carpeted floor, colourful duvet and cushions, magazines and a vase of fresh flowers. Glancing at the spines all lined up on the bookcase to her right, she recognised some of the titles. There was a copy of her favourite book, Anne of Green Gables, something that always brought comfort. So many times she had searched for guidance within the covers, Anne always helping her through the dark times. Removing the copy from the shelf, the book fell naturally open to the flyleaf. Erin took a short intake of breath as she read the loopy handwriting in red pen. Erin Nova Winslow, 1, The Close, Newton, Bucks, England, Europe, the world, the universe. This was her book from home. She could feel the hairs on her arms rising and her skin prickled. Erin reached across for a pile of books and almost dropped them when she realised they were her sketchbooks from home. She shivered as an icy breath sighed down her spine. Nausea threatened again. Taking slow, deep breaths, she took control. What is going on? Why is this happening? How long have I been here? Another hidden door slid open. Erin started and blinked. Her twin stepped into the room, the door closing silently behind her. Erin stood, and for a few moments they stared at each other, each being a mirror image of the other one, their hair being the only stark contrast. Erin's long raven black hair framed her elfin face, while Miranda's scalp was covered in stubble. Time seemed to stop. They each took a hesitant step towards the other, and then another step until they were within touching distance. Miranda held up her hand, fingers outstretched. Erin repeated the gesture until their fingertips just touched. Like statues, they paused, breathing each other in. Silence enveloped them like a warm cloak. It was just the two of them, the whole universe, for that one moment, and then suddenly Erin broke free from the spell and rushed forward to hug her sister. Miranda backed away towards the doorway, her eyes wide and her nostrils flaring. I just want to hug you. Don't be frightened, Erin explained, edging towards the cowering girl before her. Slowly, Miranda reached out her hand again, and they touched fingers. That would have to do for now, Erin thought, and gestured to Miranda to sit on one of the chairs. You have books and pencils and paper. Miranda stood, light coming back to her eyes as she smiled. These are usually locked away. May I touch them? She asked, shyly. Erin handed her paper and books, and Miranda stroked the pages. Then, holding the book to her face, she breathed in deeply, smelling the paper. Here, Erin said, handing her a pencil. Draw something. I don't know how to. We don't draw here, but I love to write. What do you do here? We learn from our teachers. We read books we're told to read, and then they are hidden away. Do you have friends here? At this, Miranda looked scared. Her eyes were haunting darkened pools and her forehead tight. We're not allowed to make friends. What are you allowed to do? Asked Erin, becoming quite exasperated. We learn, we follow rules, we exercise, we eat and sleep. We're rewarded and we're punished. What else is there in life? Miranda asked. Music, films, cartoons, chocolate, pizza, mobile phones. She tailed off as she saw Miranda was looking confused. She was rubbing her temples and shaking her head. We have music, Miranda said shyly. I like Beethoven and Mozart. You need to listen to some real music. I'll play some for you. She automatically reached towards a back pocket where she always kept her phone. No pocket, no phone. Then she remembered Mal had lent her Kara's phone. What happened to that, she wondered. Another time, perhaps, she said aloud. I need some normality, she thought. I can't think straight. My head's really hurting now. What should I do? I know, Dad always makes a hot drink when something difficult happens. It might help now. Standing abruptly, Erin asked, tea? Coffee? She turned and stood patiently for Miranda to reply. Miranda looked up. Just water, please. Erin brought it over with some biscuits, and after a moment's hesitation, Miranda took a plain biscuit and nibbled at the edge. They sat, not speaking. Erin's mind was racing with the comments Miranda had made. Finally, they talked. Erin telling her sister all about their family, her friends, school, and the town where they lived. Miranda listened, nodding and smiling. She didn't share of much what she did, apart from describing all the wonderful places she'd visited and what she'd learned from books and computers. Erin was surprised they used computers, but soon realised from what Miranda said that the information they were given was limited. I'm amazed you've travelled so much. Mum's photos show you in places from all around the world. Miranda looked puzzled. I've only left this place to meet the nice people every 5 years. We visit places in the enrichment sector. Now it was Erin's turn to look confused. How do you do that? You live in this strange place beneath the ground. We put on the special headpieces and we're away. Miranda smiled brightly. Erin contemplated this for a moment. She couldn't understand what Miranda was telling her. Trying to change the subject, she asked, "Are you happy?" "Are you?" replied Miranda. Erin was beginning to wonder how they were going to get out of this very weird school, where pupils were hurt and locked away when a voice interrupted them. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the girls are demonstrating interesting traits of the human condition. Bright overhead lights flashed on, blinding the girls momentarily. As their eyes adjusted, they looked around them. The room was a glass box. They were like goldfish in a tank, and all around the tank were rows of people glaring at them. It's like some kind of theatre, thought Erin, growing more and more frightened. Why are these people watching us? Some of the figures sitting on the chairs were making notes, and she strained to make out faces, but shrank back in confusion as she recognised her family. Why were they here? How did they get here? Her mum, Stella, and her dad, Patrick, sat together holding hands. Further along the row were Malachi and Cara, the other people she didn't recognise. A tall, thin woman in purple walked towards the glass box. She spoke to the audience. This was an unexpected part of the project, but it's a valuable lesson. As you can see from your observations over the last hour or so, here the woman gestured towards the girls. Each subject behaves very differently, and yet they are twins. Obviously, the NN 2000 programme is not over yet. Our subjects need to turn 18 before that happens. We have more research to carry out. Our thanks must go to Cara for bringing this to our attention and to give us a chance to adapt our experiment. Erin reached out to take Miranda's hand. Her twin was a carved statue and not a living, breathing creature, and then, like a spell being broken, she gasped for breath and held Erin's hand tightly. Erin glanced across at her parents, her mum dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Then she searched for Cara. She looked serene. "I knew I shouldn't have trusted you," Erin mouthed at the young woman sitting proudly next to Mal. Miss Dorling turned to the girls. "It is time to say goodbye. You will be able to see your family for a short time." The rest of the audience filed out quietly. "Did you know anything about this?" Erin asked the girl beside her. "No, I swear I knew nothing. After the punishment a few days ago, I've tried hard to be good. I've not had a blue day for a long time, so I thought today I was being rewarded." She smiled. "And I was. I met you, my older sister. I feel complete now that I've met you. Thank you for doing this. I'm so sorry about what they did. They control everything. They know everything. They watch us all the time." The door slid open, and Stella and Patrick entered. Erin ran, clinging to them like a drowned sailor to a rock. Her father stroked her hair as he held her tight. "Thank goodness you're all right." Erin pulled away and was suddenly aware Miranda was still rooted to the spot. Stella went to her youngest daughter and reached out to help her. "Pooh bums willies. Right, go back." Erin pulled away and was suddenly aware Miranda was still rooted to the spot. Stella went to her youngest daughter and reached out to hold her, but Miranda held out her hand outstretched like a starfish. Stella repeated the gesture and smiled warmly. "My darling Miranda, we've come to take you home." "Really? That's amazing. Miranda, you're going to live with us at our home." Erin was beside herself with joy. Patrick gently took Erin by the shoulders and turned around so she could look into his eyes. "You don't understand, love. I'm so sorry." "What are you talking about? Mum said Miranda is coming home with us." "Yes, she is, but you have to stay here." Patrick's eyes began to glisten with tears. "I am so sorry." "No, that can't be right. You're joking, aren't you? I can't live here. I'll die." Erin turned to her mother. "Mum, tell him I can't do this. Please, Mum." She collapsed at her mother's feet and held on tightly. She was like a small child begging for help, but her mum pulled away from her. I warned you, but as usual you didn't listen, Stella hissed. I knew how dangerous it was. You thought you understood, but you don't. Taking Miranda's hand, she walked out of the room. Erin went to follow them, but Patrick pulled her back into the room. We love you. Stay strong. You can do this. You have to do this for the sake of all of us. Then he was gone. She lay on the floor and cried and cried. Strong arms encircled her, and a voice she knew and loved whispered, "It'll be all right, sis." Mal held her tight and soothed her until the racking sobs subsided. "We don't have much time," he whispered. "We have a plan to get you out too. Now we've been down here, we have a better idea of what we're up against. Edward will be our go-between." Erin stared at her brother. "Cara, she betrayed us. You can't trust her, Mal." "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Mal took her gently to sit on the sofa. "We need you to find Frankie. We know he's here. Born February the 1st. Help him and he'll help you." Mal stood and looked down on her. "I have to go. Keep your head down. Dad gave me this to give to you." He passed her a paper boat, folded out of a map. Erin held it tightly before hiding it in the waistband of her leggings. "Thank you," she whispered. Mal turned and left the room. Erin felt empty, as though everything had been drained from her body. She crawled to the bed, burrowing herself under the covers, and cried herself to sleep.